There we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's learning event. And we are really happy to have our Partnering for Vaccine Equity Learning community members and others working on vaccine equity join us for today's conversation. My name is Eric Wengel, and I'm a member of the team organizing the group learning for our community. And on behalf of our entire team at the Urban Institute, I want to thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to continue our social media event series today. We hosted the first event of this series on November 8th, and it was focused on how to harness social media and to effectively share your messages about vaccines with adults in the communities that you're working with. And if you were unable to attend, these materials have already been posted on the Learning Community website. For many, I'm sure that social media platforms are a big way that you're trying to get your messages out. Unfortunately, misinformation and disinformation are incredibly prevalent everywhere now. Fortunately, however, we are lucky to have LaTroya here from the Center on Black Health and Equity to walk us through today how to identify misinformation when it comes across your feed and what to do about it. Before we go further, I'm going to go through our typical quick review of how this session works. We have begun offering live interpretation from English to Spanish during our events. We're working out some minor issues right now.
Estamos empezando a ofrecer interpretación.
But once it does go live, we're going to post it in the chat, and I think it just went live. So if you'd like to listen to the Spanish language channel, simply click on the globe icon in the Zoom taskbar at the bottom of your screen, and we should be all squared away on there. Everyone has been muted upon entry to this session. There are a lot of us, so staying on mute unless you are speaking is key to keeping the discussion going without accidental interruption. You do have the opportunity to speak your question rather than type it into the Q&A. It's your choice. If you want to speak your question, use the raise hand feature and we'll unmute you. If you want to type out your question, go ahead. We have the Q&A tab to do this, and you can ask a question at any point during the session, and we'll ask it during the Q&A. The chat room feature is also open today, and we encourage you to chat amongst yourselves as you'd like. But please use good chat room etiquette. And by this, I mean, don't post questions for the speaker in the chat because we might not see them there. And though this probably goes without saying, please be civil to one another and to our speaker while chatting. Finally, as with all of our learning events, we will post the slides and recording of this event on our community website and circulate them through the digests that go out through the CDC managed adult vax program listserv, which all program members should be a part of already. If you have any technical difficulties at any point during the session, go ahead and send an email to our community manager's inbox, vaxequitylearning@urban.org. We'll be watching this inbox and we'll try to help you as quickly as we can. Can you go to the next slide, please? And now it is my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, LaTroya Hester, who is the Director of Communications at the Center for Black Health and Equity, a national nonprofit concerned with health equity and improving health outcomes for African Americans. She received her bachelor's and master's in journalism from the University of Georgia and has worked in loyalty marketing, brand management, public relations, and public health. Her roster of brands includes the Home Depot, Church's Chicken, Hemophilia of Georgia, Intercontinental Hotels Group, Equifax, and the Boy Scouts of America. Hester also currently manages events and communications for the Center's State of Black Health National Conference and No Menthol Sunday. And with that, thank you so much to LaTroya for taking the time to speak with us today. And with that, I'll hand things off to you for now.
Thanks so much. I'm super excited to be here today. I now don't know if I'm sharing the right slides. I think this is exactly right. I wanted to start off with just a little story. I know we're here all to talk about misinformation in social media, but if we're honest with ourselves, we will recall that misinformation is not a new phenomenon. Pictured here, you see an article posted by Sir Conan Doyle, and he had learned of a little girl and her sister who really didn't want to come inside to play. Come inside from outside playing. And when their mother asked them, "Where have you been?" they say, "Well, we've been outside playing with the fairies." And the mother, who was a little bit open to ideas of fantastical things, thought surely this couldn't be true. But the little girls, in order to confirm their story, they cut out some sweet little fairies out of cardboard. And then they used their very rudimentary photography skills to create these photos of fairies and also gnomes and other things. And they persuaded their mother and started a whole movement kind of validating the possibility that fairies could exist. Now that was about 100 and something years ago, but fast forward, we see misinformation like this still happening. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the documentaries that are shown on like the Animal Planet and things like that, but there was a fantastic documentary that came out not too many years ago called Mermaids, the Body Found, and it was centered on the aquatic ape theory, which is not necessarily a credible theory, but it posited that mermaids could be real. Now, this was a satirical documentary, okay? So this is something that Animal Planet felt very strongly that people would know was not real. But the fact of the matter is, it was produced so well. They did all the talking heads with the lower thirds. They had all of the background information. They presented it as if it were scientific and evidence-based. It was meant to be a joke. It meant to be something that was for pure entertainment, but it started a huge storm of people wanting to believe in mermaids, because who doesn't really want to believe in Ariel, right? And so the entire scientific communities, the marine biologists, they all had to put out statements over and over and over again, trying to help people remember that mermaids are not real. We all sometimes want to believe something that's not real. And when it's presented to us in a particular way, sometimes it's just too easy for us to believe it. But the fact is, now, even on social media, and it happens all over, all throughout all kinds of different kinds of media, which we'll talk about a little bit today, is that now we've got something that's as critically important as understanding how this pandemic, how the COVID-19 vaccines are working, how viruses work, how your immunity works. And then we've taken something that's so important and wrapped tons and tons of misinformation around it. And so now, as a result, the information that's getting out around the vaccines are just as off base as some of these other kind of fantastical things that have happened. And what the problem is, as you can all imagine, is that people have a hard time distinguishing between what they want to believe and what is scientifically evident. Now, I have a personal passion when it comes to talking about media literacy. I talk about this all the time, and I believe that part of the issue, what we have to do if we want to address misinformation in social media, is that we've got to get people to be media literate. And so I'm excited to talk to you guys today because misinformation has run completely rampant. And there comes a point where we have to start building up our personal skills, getting our communities to have the skills that they need to really decipher misinformation throughout the various communities so that people can make positive, healthful decisions, not just related to COVID-19, but as it relates to information about their entire lives. Now, when it comes to COVID-19 misinformation, the information that has come out that you'll see on social media, especially as it relates to the Black community, and that's kind of where our organization, that's exactly where our organization places its emphasis and its concern. The kind of information that comes out within our community is very specific. And I want you guys to be aware of it because some of the examples that I'll be using today really hit on some of these things. So you may already be familiar with these things, but I just wanted to put them top of mind for you. Some of the misinformation looks like this. COVID-19 vaccines are new and they're untested. Vaccines don't work. Natural remedies can prevent COVID-19. I hear that one often in my community. American medicine isn't designed for Black people. The system just doesn't care about us. mRNA changes your DNA. That's something else that's been going around, of course. And then a lot of people are believing, especially in certain parts of the country, that the vaccine is a sign of the mark of the beast, which is associated with a religious ideology. Now, I want you to keep these things top of mind, but the focus of this course today is really not about debunking any of these things. Although all of these things have been debunked, you can research all of them and find out the truth. The goal really is to help us to think about how we would analyze information that we see on our timelines so that we don't turn around and share this stuff. Now, I know that you guys are on mute. I love an interactive audience, okay? So I'm just gonna pretend that in the chats, there's tons of thumbs ups if you are tracking with me, all right? All right. So today we're gonna talk about misinformation just a little bit, okay? But we're also going to talk about 5 media literacy questions that you can ask whenever you come across anything as you're scrolling on Instagram. Because being woke, being really aware of what's happening via media, the way that you do that is to ask yourself some critical questions that can just give you pause before you think about sharing that information. And then after I take a little bit of time to get you all completely critically thinking about content, then I'm going to give you a handful of actual skills that you can use. All right. But first, we're going to start with a few principles about media. Now, when we're talking about media, we're talking about TV, movies, music, all the things that you usually engage with through some kind of a medium, right? Even a book or a newspaper. So I want you to think broadly about media because everything I'm sharing with you today can be applied to all of those other various aspects. A very important principle that you've got to kind of grab a hold of before I can even move forward is that all media, including social media, communicates messages. So when we talk about misinformation, what we're really saying is that there are messages that are just not accurate. And what happens is we either consciously or unconsciously begin to adopt those messages. Now, as a person who's worked in marketing and communications for many years, I know that part of my job, even in public health communication, is to figure out how to craft a message in such a way that it will stick to you, right? That you won't forget, that it'll matter to you, and that you can either begin to form some of your attitudes and behaviors around that message. And so I want you guys to always remember that media always contains messages. This is a very important point. Now, actually, Eric, I think that my slides are not in the correct order. So I'm going to take a pause.
Sorry about that. I can take a look. Or Luis, do you have a file that you can share?
No worries. I'm just going to take a quick pause and I'm going to pull it up.
Okay.
Let me make sure I've got my share on again. Thank you guys for hanging in there with me. Are you guys hanging in there with me? All right. Can I get confirmation that you can see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Excellent. All right. So a part of what I wanted to mention before I got all into the whole media literacy piece is that a part of what our organization is doing with this project is promoting the Truth Check campaign. Now, today, you guys are all going to become truth checkers. All right. So we're going to hop back into the presentation, but I want you to keep in mind that as you're learning all of these tools, the whole point is for you to be able to truth check the content that's on your timelines. Are we good? Good. Now I'm going to skip through my slides and pick right back up where I left off. Now, I always love to talk about Marvel movies, but let me just say, when we're talking about media, we're talking about all of the messages that we're receiving through these various kinds of medium, right? So when you're watching a movie, for instance, it's really not just a movie about a superhero. This is a movie about being empowered, right? There's always a message. It can be a message about empowerment. It can be a message that's not very helpful at all, a message that is dangerous or that can create an interest in something that's not good for you. It can be a message that's super helpful that makes commentary around society and helps you to understand how the world works, right? Sometimes the messages that we get through media, and yes, maps count as media because they are communicating a specific message about something to masses, right? So even if you're looking at a map, you recognize that the media that you're engaging with can oftentimes be presenting you with really diverse perspectives, right? So it's important to understand that every time we're engaging with media, we are engaging with messages. Sometimes the messages can come even in the form of graffiti. But if you look very closely at this particular image, and it is, graffiti on a wall, you'll see something that's not quite right. We see Mark Zuckerberg, and then we see a quote, "The more of your data I gather, the more I understand what it means to be human," right? They're sort of poking fun at the way that Mark Zuckerberg can be socially and the way he's constantly collecting data on the whole entire world, correct? But if you take a look, it says that he's the founder of MySpace. And if you're not paying attention, misinformation that looks kind of right can sometimes slip in. So the point of today is to be hyper aware of all of those things so that we don't fall for what I like to call the okie doke. Who knows about what the okie doke is? I'm sure you do. So you guys are all going to be great truth checkers today. Okay, and we're going to talk about a couple of quick principles. I wish I had 3 days to do this workshop with you, which is what I usually would have in a perfect fantasy world. I would love to talk about this on length, but we're going to talk about the bigger concepts really quickly. Okay, so first of all, what is media literacy? Media literacy is your ability to access, analyze, and create media. Most of the people here on this call, you are obviously able to access media. You're engaging with me right now. I'm communicating a message to a mass audience. You guys know about social media. That's about access. The other piece that we're going to fly right over is about your ability to create media. All of us who are on social media are creating messages that are available typically to mass audiences. We are indeed creating media. But today's conversation is going to be focused on analyzing that media. So today I'm going to give you the tools that you need to do that. Now, why is this so important? Well, just a quick fact for you. On Twitter, false information is 70% more likely to be shared than accurate information. Why is that? Because oftentimes inaccurate information is more salacious, it's more interesting, it's more fun, or it's just more angering, or whatever it is. It just makes you want to engage, right? And this is a huge problem. You would think to yourself, how could all the people who make social media, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, how can they know this and just keep it moving as though none of these things have consequence? Well, the fact of the matter is there's two tensions happening, right? You have this algorithm, and the goal of the algorithm could be social good. Let's make sure that we're managing these numbers and we're watching people's behaviors to ensure that the information that gets out there is good and healthy and positive and beneficial for the people. But the fact of the matter is the algorithms are set for engagement. All of you guys already know this. We don't even have to dig deep into it. We know that the more you click, the more you like, the more you share, the more you comment, the more time you spend engaging with social media, the more ad dollars are made. So it's really a conversation about, why are we here for social good, or are we here just to make money, right? And so that tension is always there. Now, I'm not saying that all of the social media makers of the world, all the owners, all those companies are completely heartless. They have been making some strides to do the right thing. So if you take a look at this particular slide, you'll see that on Twitter, for instance, if you were to read this article, and you not just read the article, but you just read the post itself, and it sounded good. You read the headline and you click share. Well, Twitter has instituted a sort of fail-safe, not really a fail-safe, but it's helpful, where if it notices that you haven't read the article, it says, hey, wait, you want to read this first? Like before you go sharing it? Do you want to go ahead and make sure it's accurate, make sure you even agree with it, understand what's in it before you go around sharing it? And yes, Twitter put this in place, but I would argue that it's not enough. Even Facebook has recognized this problem. In fact, all the platforms, Facebook being the owner of many others, Instagram and WhatsApp, they have tried to, and I'll say they've tried, right, to address this issue. They're removing millions and millions of pieces of content, trying to wrap their minds around how we can sort of curtail the amount of misinformation that's getting out there. But the fact is, we can't necessarily trust them to do the whole job themselves, right? You guys heard about the whistleblower who's out there saying they're not really trying, right? You guys all heard that. So we know that we have to empower ourselves and our communities to become media literate and to do better. We can't really rely on all of the Facebook platform, all the social media platform owners to build a system that does the right thing. We've got to take it a step further, and we've got to know how to analyze that content for ourselves, save our own communities, right? So whenever you are engaging with media of any kind, but especially with social media, I want you to take a moment and repeat this phrase to yourself. Now, when I'm doing this in an interactive sort of situation, I make everyone stand up and say it out loud. And I'm going to pretend that you guys are all doing this with me because the eyes are watching. So listen, if you are able to, I want you to say this out loud with me. We'll read it all together. Ready? Read. Someone created this message in a particular way for a specific purpose. This phrase helps wrap up all the critical questions that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But every time you see a message on social media, I want you to remember that there was a particular person behind that message. We're going to talk about that. They created a specific message. It wasn't just there willy-nilly. They did it a specific way and they did it for a reason. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of those things, but this is a very important sort of top level principle that I want you to keep in mind. The other key principle that I want you to keep in mind before we really dig in is that strategic messages are sticky. Now, those of you who are on the call and maybe work in health communications, you know that a strategic message is one that had a lot of intention and a lot of thought behind it. In the same way that Coca-Cola decides to present their product as something that is associated with football games and smiles and friendships and good things, when you associate a message with something that can touch the emotions, the anger points, all of those things, they kind of bypass your conscious rational thinking. Like when there's a crying baby involved in the commercial, it's sort of like, oh, well, you've already hit that soft spot. And when you create a message in a strategic way, you make it funny, you make it seem like it's extremely credible when it's not. When you sort of do all these strategic things, a lot of times those messages, and on purpose, they bypass your rational thinking. And they often kind of go right to your unconscious mind, and you sort of adopt the sense that that message could be true, even if your best self doesn't necessarily agree. This is an important principle, because if you want to believe that you're sort of like not necessarily gullible enough to fall for that, you might not take seriously the tools that I want to offer you today. So it's important to remember that strategic messages, they are designed to hit you right where you will remember it most and right where you will believe it most. All right, the other thing, and I sure hope that there are some health comm people on here who know about this, or people who've been in marketing and advertising, but the point is that even with social media, all the content, all those messages, media really does act as a subtle force that can guide cultural thinking, your personal beliefs, your attitudes, and your behaviors, right? So the point is, when you're engaging and spending time just sort of passively scrolling on social media, looking through Instagram, clicking and just hearting everything you see, right? The fact is, everything that gets shared contributes to a little shift in culture and a little shift in people's behaviors, right? So it's really important that if we really want people to model healthy behaviors, take the vaccine and do what's really important for our entire country to overcome the pandemic, we have to recognize that information coming through on social media is not without consequence. It does create a subtle shift. I want you guys to keep all of these principles in mind as we move forward. And even if you can't quite remember everything I'm going to share with you today, and Eric, you help me keep time because that was a long intro, I want you to, at bare minimum, I want you to pause before you share anything on social media, especially as it relates to COVID-19 and the vaccines. If you can't remember anything we talk about, the most you need to do is just pause and give it the side eye. Now, how many of you guys know what the side eye is? I know that you're going to put it in the comments. Some of you might even have a specific definition. When I talk about the side eye, I'm talking about a pointed look of suspicion. Okay? Everybody say it. The side eye is just a pointed look of suspicion. So if you can't remember everything we talk about today, the most I want you to be able to do is this, right? Like, I don't know about that, because that will get us so far to prevent the spread of disease if we can just pause and prevent the spread of misinformation. So let's dig in. Remember, everything we say today, someone created this message in a particular way for a particular purpose. Let's focus on the first piece, which is someone. When you are engaging with social media, I want you to ask yourself, who created this message? Like, where did this come from? What is the source? Is this an actual doctor talking about these things? Or is it just somebody in a white coat pretending to be one playing one on TV? A lot of times when we're just scrolling on social media, we're really not taking the time to look and think about who this so-called doctor in the white coat is. If my toe hurts, do I need to take advice from a pediatrician or from a podiatrist, right? So let's really think about who created the source. Interestingly enough, as a part of this project, I've really come to find out that when it comes to misinformation related to COVID-19, there's only about a dozen profiles that are responsible for the majority of misinformation about COVID-19 and the vaccines online. They call it the disinformation dozen. And it just goes to show how just a small seed handful of profiles can create such a windstorm of misinformation. And so I want us to always be thinking about the who whenever we see messages and whenever we see social media content. Who created that message? In the Black community, just sort of as a way to help you understand who is often the who, there are sort of sets of caricatures that I would call who tend to perpetuate the misinformation that we see. And if you're aware of who these personalities are who tend to spread misinformation, you might, number one, be familiar with them. They might be your friends. You might be one of them, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the other thing is that it'll just help you to kind of be hyper aware of what kinds of personas tend to show up on social media. So number one, we have the one who's always instigating, right? You already know she's always got something to say about something. And most of the time she's chasing likes and she's really funny. And she usually tries to start a little argument online saying, this vaccine wasn't created fast. There's no way it could have been created so quickly. I don't know what I'm going to do, but that kind of thing, the person who's always instigating, that person. Then there's the one who's always got jokes. Yeah, he's not really saying one way or the other, but he is kind of undermining the credibility of scientific information because he continues to make jokes and make light and also cast doubt on really credible and scientific information. So when you see this character on social, you might just want to, swipe. So the next character that we see is the one who's always researching something. She's probably your cousin. She probably did not finish grad school. She probably did not finish her pre-med program, but she's like, well, I read. And she's always posting information that's not necessarily backed by science. You want to watch out for this kind of a person as well, because these are the kinds of characters that continuously perpetuate misinformation. Then there's the one who's always preaching. A lot of times these are our faith-based leaders who may not have all the information that they need to really make a statement about something as serious as the COVID-19 vaccines. And so you want to make sure that whoever you're following are credible and they're really serious about the sources that they use. So you've always got to ask yourself, whenever you see the information about, COVID-19 and the vaccines, especially, but about anything on social media, ask yourself, is this person the most credible source? If you're taking notes, and I hope that you are, write that down. Is this person the most credible source? But you also want to ask yourself, is this person a trusted source? And then I want you to ask yourself, are you a trusted source? Because for many of us, especially those of us who are community leaders or who are in public health or who already have the eye of our family, we have the respect of many, many people, we have a following. And whenever we post information online, those folks pay attention to what we say. And we want to make sure that we are also a trusted source whenever we're posting content. So again, who created the message? Who created this information? Who is the source is an important first step. When you're talking about yourself as the source, we have to be humble and we have to be aware of the fact that the information that's coming to us personally is not often a well-rounded curated set of information, right? So if you look at this website, it's a really great website called The Markup, and they will literally give you a demographic and they'll compare two kinds of demographics and they'll show you the kind of information, and it goes into statistical numbers. It'll show you what's showing up on their feed. right? Or on their timeline. So if you look at a millennial, you can see there's more often you've got NPR, New York, look, got my NPR t-shirt on today. So there you go, The Hill, and you can see what kind of publications that they're being introduced to. And then if you've got the boomer on the other side, you can see that they're more likely to be getting their information from CNN, from Fox News, from lots of other news sources. So that means that even though I think that I've arrived to my opinion on my own, maybe all the information that's coming to me is one-sided. And I've got to take the extra step to ensure that I am consuming well-rounded information because I want to be a trusted source. Another little tidbit for you, just as you're thinking about how important it is for you to be fully aware of how your mind works and potential shortfalls, is something called confirmation bias. Many of you may already be familiar with this. But here's the thing, when you see information online that is based on facts, and then you see information that conflicts with what you previously thought, your brain sort of doesn't necessarily adopt the facts as quickly as we would hope. In fact, if you see information that's pretty much true, and then you see information that confirms your previous belief, you're gonna pretty much believe something there in the middle, right? It's much harder to get your brain to adopt some information that is starkly in contrast with what it previously thought. That means that if you are holding specific beliefs and ideas around any subject, you just have to be aware that sometimes confirmation bias can make you not the best source. And that is not to say that there's anything wrong with it. These are normal psychological processes. The point is that if you're aware that this could be a weakness, that I'm not really sure, I know what I believe, but I also know about this thing called confirmation bias, you will take a pause before you share information that you are sure is true, especially if it isn't backed by science. So who created the message? Think about that. Make sure that you are a credible source. Make sure that every information, that every bit of social media content that you decide to share is from a credible source. Next, when we're talking about those critical thinking questions, you want to ask yourself whose perspective is represented and whose is not. When it comes to media messages, even in social media, sometimes a message seems to be well-rounded or it seems to be well thought out. But the fact is, because it came from a particular person, it may be representing only one side of the story. For instance, when it comes to something like mask wearing, we see that there's this conversation happening around freedom. But freedom from what? Freedom for one is not necessarily freedom for another when it comes to the mask related conversations. So you always want to ask yourself whose perspective in this post is being represented and whose perspective is not. That's a super important question. Next thing you want to ask yourself is what techniques were used to get my attention? Which techniques? Because when you see a certain post like this one here, you see a major Black leader and figure, but I want to draw your attention not to the person. I want to draw your attention to the way that this post was done. You got these red letters, you got these emojis going crazy, and it says, why do you trust taking a vaccine from the people that enslaved you, right? Oh, he's just pulling out all the historical context. He's really trying to get me, right? And at first glance, I might look at this and be like, yeah, you're right. But that's not what we're gonna do, right? That's not what we're gonna do. We're gonna sit and think critically. If he went to these links to position this message in a particular way, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna give it the side eye, right? I want you to always be thinking about the way in which people present information as a moment for you to say, if they did it this way, why? If a message sounds like it's too good to be true, if it's too emotional or too angering, too scary, too outrageous, it's a little too unverifiable, right? Even if it's too validating, remember we talked about confirmation bias. If it's like, I knew I was right, wait a minute. If it's too validating, you might want to take a step back and pause before you share that information. Make sure that it's true. If it's too loyal to one group, if it's just too much aligned with the particular political party or a particular ideology, you just might want to take a moment to take a step back. And just because the person has got a a check by their name on social doesn't necessarily mean that it is the best information. If you look at this post right here, it says, well, you can read it there. What I want to point out is the fact that, you know, again, we're having these conversations about the mark of the beast. And to me, that's just like a big call. Like you're pulling in some big religious concepts. You're talking about a vaccine passport. It's just a lot. So let's take a moment to pause, look up this information before we share it. Make sure it's just not too something. So always check the two-ness of it when we're thinking about what the techniques were used. What techniques were used here? If you look at this post, it's like, oh, you're calling out a lot of things that would outrage me or interest me. And I think that you've got an agenda. So always ask yourself what techniques were used to get my attention. I wanted to show this video, but I'm not going to do it right now for the sake of time. But when I look at this particular video, you have the woman on the right. She's got the lock. She's doing the whole Angela Davis thing, Black intellectual, and she's talking about the vaccine, and she's doing it in a way. She's talking fast. She's making me feel like, oh, she must really know what she's talking about. In this video, she uses big words. And to me, these are all techniques that are great for getting my attention, right? And the woman on the left in this particular image is she's listening to the video. It's a TikTok video, and she's responding word for word, debunking what the other woman is saying. My point is that when people go to particular links to position a message a certain way, we've got to give it a pause, because it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true just because young Angela Davis type is delivering it, right? All right. Although I do love her glasses. Another important question that you've got to ask yourself, okay, is what is the purpose of this message? Everybody's got an agenda. Just because it's on TikTok or just because it's even in a movie doesn't mean that this information is just there for pure entertainment, or that it's a fact that's there for my personal benefit. If you look at this particular post, which had to be debunked because you can see how the social media platform where it was paused and put up missing context. It talks about the fact that it talks about Hank Aaron's death and tries to attribute it to the vaccine. Now, this has been debunked and fact-checked over and over and over again, but the point is, this particular post was not there just to alert the Black community that, you know, this hero has died of the vaccine. The fact is, if you click a little bit further, the author here is actually promoting a documentary. And you will understand that the whole point of this post is not about Hank Aaron. It's not about anything besides self-promotion and profits. So always think about the purpose behind a message. There's several other points I could say about the way that this thing was fact-checked, but the point is there was an agenda, and it was an opportunity to spread misinformation just in pursuit of an agenda. So when you're going through the fact checking or the truth checking process, you just have to be reminded to ask yourself, who created this? What's the source? What's the evidence? What are other people saying? I recently went to go see Hamilton, which was an incredible show, but I will tell you, I walked away thinking that Alexander Hamilton was the greatest abolitionist who ever lived. Right? Because all throughout the production, there were these moments where he talked about the importance of freeing enslaved people and really thinking about, like, how are we going to get behind the cause of abolition? But that lasted about 30 minutes, because then I remembered that there are historians that have pointed out many, many missteps in this play, in this show of history that, you know, they don't agree with. Like, the fact of the matter is, maybe Alexander Hamilton wasn't such a staunch abolitionist as he was positioned in this show. And so it's really important for me to have thought to myself, okay, wait, who created this? Was a historian behind this show, or was it a rapper who's just really talented? Right? And what do the other sources say? What do historians say about this? And so even if I'm engaging with content and media outside of social media, I still got to ask these questions, but it was still a phenomenal show. All right. So again, all I want you guys to do is pause and give information that you see on social media the side eye before you share it. All right, so let's keep going. Let's keep going. I'm going to skip past this, this section just because I lost a little bit of time. And I want to talk to you about particular skills that you can use. Now, after you have done all your critical thinking, you already know how to ask who created this message, what is the information, what is the purpose behind this information, what techniques were used to give this information, and also remembering to ask which perspectives were represented in that information and which were not. Now we're critically thinking. Now we know how to pause and give it the side eye. But most of the content that we come across on social media are really providing us links to where we can get more information online. And most of these are articles about what's being posted. So I'm going to give you some quick tools, tangible things. You can use it right now. You can use it right now to be able to decipher and to truth check the information that comes across on your timeline. All right. So the first one is lateral reading. Lateral reading is just the process of reading an article. Instead of reading it straight down the page like we usually would, when you are reading an article online, I want you to think about reading from side to side, okay? What lateral reading does is it calls you to open multiple tabs as an automatic habit, so that as you are reading downward, and most of us just read it from the top and we scroll right down, don't we? We scroll right down to the bottom of the page, and that's how we read the article. But lateral reading calls you really to, as you scroll, start Googling the topic. If an expert is mentioned in that article, go ahead and plop their name in the tab next door, right? If you are looking at the source of the lab or the university that published this information that's mentioned in the article, go ahead and pop that in the next tab, right? The point here is that you're not just taking the entire article at face value, reading it from top to bottom. I want you to question what you read and go ahead and fact check and verify that information by reading across laterally in multiple tabs. So that's your first tool. Write that down, lateral reading. The next one is reading upstream. Now, I'm a military kid, and I always think about, the idea of the chain of command, and that's how I remember this idea of reading upstream. So whenever you see information online, I want you to think about how you can kind of go a step above and find out where the original source came from, what the original date was. Is there an updated version of that article? So for instance, if you look here on these slides, you'll see that there's an article that was published by, or it's commenting on an article or a study that Cleveland Clinic put out, right? And it's from newsmax.com. And if you look at what it says here, it says that natural immunity is as effective as vaccination. And it says, and it seems to imply that that's what Cleveland Clinic said. But if you wanted to read upstream, you would do a couple of things. You would go to Cleveland Clinic's website and you would read the original statement, right? You would also look to make sure that there was not an updated version of that very particular study. So you can see the original post here is from June 23rd, but if you go to the article on Cleveland Clinic's website, you will see there's an updated version in August the 16th. And so you will get yourself in a ton of trouble if you just take information that sounds good, looks good, and shares it without giving it that side eye, right? What you want to do is read upstream to make sure that the original information, the context, the thing that is cited is what it says that it is. That'll help you a ton. The next one is really, I'm ashamed to have to put this on your list of tools that you should use. But listen, read beyond the headline. When you see information on social media, if you see it on Facebook or on Twitter and you see this shocking headline, if your instinct is to just share it before you read the article, just don't. Just don't. Please, please read beyond the headline. That means just point blank, read the actual article. If you want to be a credible source to those who you're sharing content to, please remember to read beyond the headline. If you looked here, you can see this headline here: Texas Lieutenant Governor Patrick's false claim about unvaccinated Black people. And there's this great source, factcheck.org. And basically, if you read the article, you will see that there's a real mismatch between the article and the headline, and factcheck.org nips that in the bud right away, just the way I hope that all of you are able to do, just by reading beyond the headline. All right, here's another trick, another tip. Reverse image search. Sometimes people don't realize that Google is your friend. Now, if you start Googling things and you find out, you feel like you've become an expert in something, remember that Google is not a PhD, it's just a source of lots and lots of information. But one of the cool features that Google has is called a reverse image search. Now, this image that you see here, the post that's here, is all about, like at the first glance, even if you're just picking up words here, it sounds like there's dead people who have died from the coronavirus, that this is some sort of a religious punishment, right? And this is supposedly I think it's supposedly in China, right? But if you did a reverse image search, you would find out that this is actually an art exhibit from Germany that was taken. This image was taken years and years and years and years ago. And these people have just attached this image to this post for clicks, for craziness, to spread lies and misinformation. But you guys are going to be smarter than that. You guys are truth checkers, right? You know how to check these things. You could take this image and you slide it right into a Google image search. Just go to Google, click on where it says images, slide the image right in there, and it will show you every known use of that photo. Then you can see where it originally came from. That's called a reverse image search, and it could really help you just to spot things that don't seem quite right. And it's an easy tool you can remind your friends to do. So you don't even have to spend time arguing with them about whether or not something is true or not. You can just say, hey, have you searched that image before? Easy. Now, this last one is probably the hardest of all. So we're just going to have to take a moment. I'm going to need some participation here because I can't see the chat. Can someone put in the chat box for me www.don'tclickonthis.com? Just put that in there for me. I'll know it's there because I'll see it come up. Yeah. Okay. So someone put it in there for me. Now, everyone, I know this is hard. So I just want you to kind of take a deep breath. Okay. Focus. Look at the link. Don't click on it. Just, I know it's hard. I know it's hard, but just take a minute. Just trust me on this one. Self-control. Don't click on it. Don't click on it. So this particular skill for me in particular is like really hard sometimes because, you know, clickbait be calling my name sometimes. I just got to know. No, we don't. Because when you decide that you're going to click on something that you can see clearly is clickbait, that you should not click on that, what you're going to do is you're going to increase the engagement on that particular post. And that is just going to perpetuate the problem because we all know how algorithms work, right? So as another tool, along with lateral reading, along with reading upstream, reading beyond the headline, and doing that reverse image search, guys, is just plain click restraint. Just hold back, just don't do it, just don't click. That is a really, really powerful skill. I promise it seems trivial, but it's not. All right, so what we're gonna do really quickly is I'm gonna show you an article, and I'm gonna point out some things about this article. We don't have time, there's not a mechanism for interaction here, but what I want you to do is in your spare time, and I really do actually want you to do this, is go back to that original post that I showed you at the very beginning. It's this one here where the headline says 920 women lose their unborn babies after getting vaccinated. Let me say that has been debunked and that is false. So I want you to know and be reminded that I'm showing you this because this is an example of misinformation. What I want you to do after we're done here is I want you to go through the questions that we talked about. I want you to ask yourself, who is this source, this Dr. L. Kroner? Who is she? What is she a doctor of? I want you to see if you can find the original article that references this misinformation. I want you to look at this link, but I don't want you to click it, that she posts in the actual post, okay? I want you to find the scientific evidence that really debunks this, and I want you to find out the truth. Apply those things that we've talked about. But if it turns out that process, that little bit of homework is too much, I just want you to keep these last little things in mind. You choose your voices, you choose your values, and you choose your validators wisely. Your voices, who are you going to receive your information from? Who do you want showing up in your timeline? Do you want it to be the World Health Organization and the CDC, incredible science-based information for helping you to make your decisions? And is that what you want for yourself as well? What are your values? Are you going to be the kind of person that knows how to pause and give a side eye to information that might not be real because you want to believe it or because it sounds halfway true? And choose who your validators are, y'all. All likes are not good likes. All money is not good money. So just because people are liking and hearting and giving you a pat on the back does not mean that you should keep pushing forward with sharing information that might not have been truth checked, right? So are you with me? Let me see in the comments, which I can't even see them, but go ahead and talk amongst yourselves, that you are definitely going to choose your values, your voices, and your validators wisely, right? So from here, we're going to do a quick exercise. Just in case you cannot remember anything I told you today, we're going to practice giving the side eye, right? What is that? The pointed look of suspicion. So are we all ready to participate? Yes, we are. I want everybody to get your faces together, get your side eye just exactly the way it's supposed to be. I'm going to show you some information, and all you have to do, guys, and I brought some celebrity friends to help us out in this, so don't worry, you're not going to be all by yourself. You're going to look at this information and you're going to give it the side eye. Are we ready, set, go? This one is posted and it says hundreds of thousands of people died after taking the advice of these celebrities who are aiding and abetting mass murder by advocating COVID-19 vaccination. What are we going to do? We're not even going to click on this. What we're going to do, we're going to give it the what? Side eye. If you look at this YouTube video, I have watched it, my friends, and it says down here, will they put a chip in the coronavirus vaccine? Guys, I watched it. I promise that is not even what he's talking about. So what are we going to do? We're going to give it the what? Side eye. That's what we're going to do with that information. If you can't remember all the skills, if you don't think critically, if you don't even want to do the lateral reading, you don't want to do the research, just give it the side eye and pause and don't share that. Don't share that. When Candace Owens says that the CDC actually put together a document to discuss putting high-risk people in camps, we just going to give that the what? Yeah, that's what we're going to do with that. And then lastly, if you see something that's just funny and it's just lighthearted, it's like the vaccine, the blood of Jesus, and ginger ale. Yes, ma'am. We are going to take a little laugh, but we're not going to share it. Instead, we are going to invite Miss Obama to give it the what? Yes. You guys did a great job. I hope that this information was useful for you. I hope that you will remember the tools that I've shared, but at the very least, continue to spread credible information and be excellent truth checkers. If you are interested in sharing either this recorded version or taking our e-learning course, which is available, it's a really quick 10-minute sort of tutorial on all of these things, go to thetruthcheck.org. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much for that presentation, LaTroya. Now, I think we have a brief 5-minute Q&A, and I think we've got some really good questions, and if you don't mind. First one, can you repeat how to do a reverse image search on Google again?
So when you go to Google, like if you go to the Google search, there is usually right across the bottom a couple of options. One of those options should be image. If you don't see it under the search bar, there's usually a drop down and it will say image there. So once you click and it looks just like the regular search bar, you can drag photos into it and Google will immediately just show you all of the instances that it can find.
Excellent. Okay. And then, so given your marketing experience, what is a great way to counter misinformation, to fact check it, but also still be a great message at the same time?
So the challenge is remembering that most people don't want to be persuaded. So I would really suggest, you can present information and ask questions like, oh, who created that message? And allow the person to take that step and do that research. That's when it comes to debunking information. But in terms of how to just in terms of one thing that you can do is you can continue to be a credible source for the people who follow you by putting out evidence-based information on a regular basis, because the more they see that information, the more it will eventually sink in. But I also do think that sometimes you got to let people ask those questions of themselves and go and find them out.
And then we've got another good question here. How do you get to know your enemy? Like what is the best way to go about that? I think it's in reference to one of the slides.
Say that one more again.
How do you get to know your enemy?
Say that one more time. Get to know your
enemy.
How do you get to know your enemy? I'm not sure what's meant by that. In terms of like the disinformation,
I think so. Like if you're not clicking on their information, how do you get to know like about them if you're not actually interacting with it?
So remember that most of the time when we're engaging in social media, we're engaging passively. And so the people who are spreading misinformation, all their content is out there. And I mean, it's like trolling. Some people call it research, some people call it trolling, but enough researchers have actually trolled long enough and collected enough content to recognize that they're behind all of that misinformation. And so if it is your your assignment or your interest to sort of really understand what their techniques are, certainly doing an environment, like doing a scan of the content that they're producing, and then really thinking of why that information has emotional pull for their audience. What is it about that information that's so capturing? And asking yourself, what is that audience most motivated by? That will help you to, if you are in the business of creating counter messages, understanding what that audience is really in need of, if it's safety, if it's validation, if it's any of those things. Use evidence-based information to craft messages based on that. So you can study the enemy by trolling or doing research of what we call environmental scans or social scans, and then create a message strategy based on what the audience wants. I don't know if that answers that.
I think it does. And I hope that for our audience participant, it answers their question as well. And now, since we are running out of time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, including yours, LaTroya, I just want to take a few minutes with our last couple of minutes. We'd really appreciate it if you can complete this brief satisfaction poll, which should be popping up. There we go. If you can just take a few minutes to complete this poll, we really do appreciate it. And so while you're doing that, I think Bridget is posting in the chat some links to our upcoming learning events. And so after Thanksgiving on November 30th, we'll have the third and maybe final for now, we'll see how it goes, of our social media event series. And this final one will be focused on social media attacks and how best to respond to them. On December 13th, we'll be hosting an event focused on the evidence of incentives on changing health behaviors, including vaccinations. And at this event, you'll learn about some best practices for vaccine incentives and how to best incorporate evidence on incentives into your work. And then on December 15th, we also have a webinar to help you get more familiar with the Vaccine Resource Hub and the recent upgrades that we've made to it. And at this event, we'll explore some new enhancements to the website and how best to use it in your work. And we hope that as many of you can join these events as possible. But if you're not free to join them live, like always, we do post the slides and a video recording of the event within a day or two of it after the fact normally. And then I just want to thank LaTroya again for taking the time to share her expertise with us today, and a truly fantastic presentation. And I hope all of you have a really good afternoon.